Welcome, adventurers. Today on Rebel Then King, we are going to talk about the two new classes introduced in the War of Immortals rulebook for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. As always, the standard prerequisite warning or disclaimer of Paizo did send me an advanced copy of this so that I could review, and then I promptly went on a long camping trip and then came back and actually read it. So I'm finally getting around to this now, and the views and opinions in this are my own, and thank you again to Paizo for the advanced copy. What I want to talk about are the two new classes, kind of a high-level overview, but mostly talk about how different these truly are, because we kind of have two completely new means of organization for classes in these two new entries. There's no real subclasses for either, but it's also not just feat selection like we have with a fighter and a monk, and we have kind of our first prepared spontaneous caster, and possibly the most character options ever for a class. Let's start with the Animist. The Animist, again, I'm not going to go into full details here. There is full coverage on some other channels, Bad Luck Gamer in particular, so you can check those out. But what you need to know for this video is that it is a wisdom-based divine caster. It's partially a prepared spellcaster with one divine spell and two divine cantrips prepared each day, but it's also partially a spontaneous caster. You get one spontaneous spell and two cantrips from your attuned apparitions, that's plural, multiple apparitions, spell repertoire. So this is interesting. Let's talk about apparitions. So yeah, as an animist, you speak to the dead, those beyond the void, and you work with them. Specifically, each day during your daily preparations, choose two apparitions from the list on page 17 to attune to. Each of these will grant you one spell per rank, one cantrip, and training in two skills, though only one is going to be your primary apparition, which will grant you a focus spell and then later can take a physical form called the avatar form as an advanced ability. When you tally this all up, there are 11 total apparitions, and remember, you get to pick two, any two. That is actually 55 unique combinations available to you. This is where we start to get into the very interesting amount of choice that you have in this book. We're going to talk about the numbers a little bit more later, though. There is another bit of variety in the Animist in their Animist practice. It's a very light subclass system. It is basically, what kind of an Animist are you? There are 4 options, and each grants a class feat at levels 1, 9, and 17. So really, mostly amounts to just a class feat, though technically there are some slight other bonuses that each of the practice add, or some of the practices add. So it's a very, very, very light subclass system. So how many options is this really? Well, I mean, that's the 55 that we came up with from the 11 combinations, or the combination of 11 Animist apparitions, times 4, that's 220. So 220 unique Animist builds. But I kind of want to dial that back and say, what really constitutes a unique build? Considering that your second apparition really only grants a cantrip and spell and training and not a focus spell and no other abilities, does that really count? I mean, in a way, it's kind of just like spell selection for your day. And you wouldn't certainly say that a wizard who prepares one set of spells one day and the next set of spells a different day is a different wizard. That's still the same build with just some day-to-day selections. So maybe the apparition selections shouldn't really count as unique builds. Maybe we define it instead as a focus spell plus which practice you have, which Animist practice. I do see that in a lot of, or at least in my opinion, in a lot of other spell casting classes, the focus spell is kind of what defines or is the strongest definition of the subclass. So if we thought of that, plus the unique practice abilities, that would be 44 total options. But then maybe we would just go on the focus spell alone, because the practices kind of just amount to feat selections. And again, I certainly wouldn't consider a martial build, let's just pick, a swashbuckler with the fencer style who chooses one feat to be a different build per se than a swashbuckler, a fencer style who chooses a separate, like a different feat than that first one. That's still, yes, that is a different build, but I wouldn't call that like a different type of swashbuckler at this point. So I don't know. Maybe we would just say there are only 11 options with the Animist class based on which apparition you're going with your primary. But then you also have to remember, this is what makes it so hard to count, is there are day-to-day differences. Either way you pick it, remember you get to pick both apparitions daily with an asterisk of unless you are using the Relinquish Control class feat. Maybe there were some others in there that I missed. This actually does say you have to pick one primary and stick with it. So really, in a way, the number of options of the Animist build is a moot point because you'll be choosing again every day. Or maybe that actually makes it more important. Anyway, let's take a look at some of the options and kind of do an analysis of what types of things the Animist can do. Over to the spreadsheet. All right, in this spreadsheet, what I've done is I've listed out each of the apparitions, the 2 skills that they provide training in, as well as their cantrip, their spell, and their focus spell, and I have classified each of those to say whether the spell, focus spell, and cantrip is melee damage, range damage, support, healing, skill boost, those types of things, to give you a sense of the kinds of things that you can do with your Animist. I've also highlighted 3 of my favorites, which we are going to take a look at now, starting with the Custodian of Groves and Gardens. I am a gardener. I like this. I also mechanically like it quite a lot. So what does this do for us? Well, we get training in farming lore and herbalism lore. All right. Tanglevine, cantrip, that's a good one. And then the Protector Tree spell at level 1, at rank 1. I really like Protector Tree. I have used it on several builds. I'm playing as a Wood Kineticist that has Timber Sentinel, which is Protector Tree. So this is very cool. And then the Vessel spell is a great healing spell. When you cast this spell and the first time you sustain it, on each subsequent round, you generate a pulse of renewing energy that heals each creature within the emanation for 1d4 hit points. I love it. That is so cool. The other one that I really like is the Imposter in Hidden Places. So let's take a look at that. There it is. Okay. The skills are fortune-telling lore and underworld lore. Very cool, dark, mysterious. Telekinetic Hand is the cantrip, and Ill Omen is the spell. And then the Vessel spell, the focus spell that it grants you, is discomforting? Discomforting. That's a typo, isn't it? The word is discomforting. Discomfiting isn't a word, is it? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's a typo that I just noticed. It turns out discomfiting is a word, and discomforting is a word. There are lots of combinations like this in English where, honestly, I think it's the same word, and someone misheard it slightly at one point and just wrote it down slightly differently. That's the story I'm going with, at least. Anyway, you are surrounded by an aura of spiteful murmurings that incite bad luck and punish failure. Awesome right off the bat. Each creature that starts their turn within the area of this spell must succeed at a will save or roll twice on their first attack roll that round and take the lower result. So that is a serious debuff. That is very cool. And then the other one that I want to talk about is the Vanguard of Roaring Waters. Let's jump down to that. Very cool name to begin with. I mean, come on. And then you're trained in mountain lore and river lore, which just makes sense, especially when we see the focus spell that we're about to look at. The cantrip is Rousing Splash. I always like that one. A little bit of temp hit points from a cantrip. You use it over and over. Fantastic. And then Hydraulic Push is the spell, a classic attack spell for, a lot of druids and sorcerers and things like that. And then the very cool Vessel spell. For the duration of the spell, you have lesser cover against ranged attacks and gain a 10-foot status bonus to each speed that you have. When you first cast the spell and each time you sustain it, you can stride up to your speed while your apparition fills each square you pass through with lingering energy of a coursing river. These squares become difficult terrain until the start of your next turn. So you are super fast and you leave difficult terrain behind in every square that you go through. So you can use this to just zip around and basically draw the battlefield that you want to be fighting on, which I think is super cool. As far as some of the totals here, so I did add up the lores and the skill training, and there weren't very many repeats, but I've highlighted that fortune telling lore came up a few times, 3 times, and mountain lore came up twice. Otherwise, there were no repeats that I found in the training. As far as the cantrips go, not too surprising. It's a little bit leaning more towards support, but it's pretty well rounded overall. I found 1 melee damage cantrip, 2 range damage, meaning, that's the primary focus of the cantrip. And then overall 4 total supports based on these different categories of battlefield control, which I have a typo in, buff, debuff, protection. 1 healing cantrip, and then 3 skills related cantrip that, is like exploration or gives you a bonus to a skill or something like that. As far as the spells go, again, a mixture, but definitely leaning more on support here, which makes sense. I mean, most spells, I would say, in the game do lean towards support. It's kind of the role that casters tend to take more often. But as you can see, there are still some good damage spells in there. And then, not surprising, the same distribution more or less applies to the vessel spells, their focus spells. Quite a lot in support, some melee, some ranged, and a little bit of healing and a little bit of skill training as well. So in the end, you're probably going to be playing the Animist pretty similarly to other casters in the sense that you will be sticking to the back, doing some range damage, maybe getting close every now and then, debuffing, buffing, providing a little bit of healing, probably not being your primary healer. I would say definitely not being your primary healer, but you can chip in multiple ways with the Animist. And now we are going to talk about the Exemplar, the divine martial that was released in this book. If you thought there was a lot of variety in the Animist, just buckle up here. It is another divine build. This time you use Dex or Strength because this is a martial class, and your power comes from your divine spark and your icons that you use. Let's talk about the icons. There are 3 types. You have body, weapon, and worn. You pick 3, any 3. You don't have to pick 1 weapon, 1 body, 1 worn. Any 3 you want. You can pick 3 different weapons. Only 1 is ever active at a time that is carrying your divine spark. And each icon has 2 types of effects. There's an imminence effect that is just a passive, always on, always in place. And then there is a transcendence effect that is a specialty kind of bigger action that actually will result in your divine spark leaving your icon so that you need to either put the spark back in it or use a different icon afterwards. Now for the icon variety. There are 21 total, and you pick 3, any 3. This does remind me a bit of the Thaumaturge at later levels because the Thaumaturge can, or will, I should say, pick up to 3 implements as they level up, but they only have 1 implement at level 1. This is 3 to begin with. And by the quick calculations I used on some website I looked up because I frankly don't know what exactly math to do, this is 1,330 unique combinations because that is 21 total things that you can pick as long as you don't repeat in any combination. That's over 1,000 combinations of an exemplar. That is insane. Let's take a look at the options and then again talk about the implication of these options, what actually constitute an option, all of that kind of stuff. But onto the exemplar spreadsheet. All right, what I have done with the exemplar spreadsheet, the icon spreadsheet, is similar to what I did with the Animist apparitions. I'm listing them all, and I'm writing out which type. I've classified their imminence effects, their transcendence effects, and then I've also classified whether the imminence or transcendent effects are sort of a team effect, indicating this affects your allies too, or if it's just something that affects you. And then to kind of take a look at some examples, I have highlighted my top 5. So my top 5 starts with the Barrow's Edge, which is a weapon icon. The first thing that happens is the imminence effect is you deal 1 additional spirit damage per weapon damage die to a creature that it strikes. Already pretty cool. Lots of spirit damage, by the way, with the Exemplar, which is awesome. If the creature is below half its maximum hit points, the weapon deals 3 additional spirit damage per weapon dice instead. Barrow's Edge rattles more strongly when an enemy is below half its maximum hit points. So this is so cool. It accelerates its damage if the creature is already pretty well damaged. And technically, it does say that the weapon will rattle, so you should know when that is happening, which, sometimes depending on how you're playing or what visibility you have into things in your either actual tabletop or virtual tabletop, you might not know how damaged a creature actually is. This actually has rules that says your implement will shake in your hand. When I said implement because I'm thinking thaumaturge. Your icon will shake in your hand, rattle in your hand, letting you know. And then the transcendence effect, Drink of My Foes, just a brutal name. If your last action was a successful strike with the Barrow's Edge, the effect is your blade glows as it absorbs your foe's vitality. You gain hit points equal to half the damage dealt. Awesome. So you could know that something is hurt, land that huge final blow, and then absorb half of those hit points afterwards. Amazing. Now onto the Mirrored Aegis. So I'm going to scroll down and find that. This is a Warn icon. It emits an aura in a 15-foot emanation that protects you and your allies in the aura from granting you a +1 status bonus to AC. So it is a group protection passive effect. That is very cool. And then the Transcendence effect is Raise the Walls. You raise the Mirrored Aegis, which summons ethereal shields that surround you and one ally of your choice within 15 feet in a tortoise shield formation. You and the ally gain a +1 status bonus to AC, to reflex saves, and any save against force, spirit, vitality, or void damage for a minute. So this is a great way to keep those benefits going for one action, because it lasts a minute. It doesn't need to be sustained. It is just one action to do that. That is very cool. Already we can see we've got a mixture of protection, of damage, and of other things that you can do with your Exemplar. Now let's take a look at the Noble Branch, which is another weapon. Imminence effect, very simple. The Noble Branch deals 2 additional spirit damage per weapon damage die to creatures it strikes. Great. The Transcendence effect is very cool, though. If your last action this turn was a successful strike with the Noble Branch, the effect is you channel a rending pulse of energy down your weapon in the moment of contact. The target of the strike takes spirit damage equal to the Noble Branch's weapon damage dice. This includes any extra dice from striking runes, but not from... So it is just automatic extra damage on top of what you already did. This is the way to pile in a lot of damage as a martial. Now onto another favorite called Scar of the Survivor. This is another, actually, I think this is the first body one that we've taken a look at. This is a scar on your body, and the imminence effect is that divine energy spreads outward from your scar, reinforcing your flesh. You gain the benefits of the Die Hard feat and a +1 status bonus to fortitude saving throws. Okay. The Transcendence effect, no scar but this. One action, your wounds knit shut with hardly a scratch. You regain 1d8 hit points in a 3rd level, and every 2 levels thereafter, it increases by 1d8. So that's kind of like once a turn healing, if you wanted to use it that way, which is pretty incredible. I mean, you wouldn't have a lot of actions to do other things, but it's kind of like the perfect way to just sit there and tank and not go down and waste enemy actions. Very fun. And then finally, I'm going to go to the Victor's Wreath, which is the last in the list, coincidentally. This is a worn icon, as you might have guessed. You inspire your allies to greater glory. You and your allies in a 15-foot emanation gain a +1 status bonus to attack rolls. So kind of an exemplar bard, basically. And you know I like bards. The Transcendence effect, 1 moment till glory. You rally your allies, carrying them from the brink of disaster to the verge of victory. Each ally in your aura can immediately attempt a new saving throw with a +2 status bonus against one ongoing negative effect or condition currently affecting them, even if that effect would not normally allow a new saving throw. This could be huge. And again, this is very bard-like with counter performance, kind of a similar vibe. If you are in a room and something poisons all of you, there's a gas cloud, Victor's Wreath, everyone, let's try a new saving throw. It could be something frightened you and you're all frightened too. New saving throw. Go to, shake that off right away. It's pretty incredible. But now let's take a look at some of the totals. A little less to go over this time. Again, there are 21 total icons. They're not very evenly distributed in terms of the type. It is a martial class, so there are the most amount of weapon icons with 10. There are 9 worn and only 5 body, so it's not a completely even split. And again, this is 1,330 unique combinations of those. As far as what they do, in the Imminence effect, none of the Imminence does area of effect damage because, well, that would just be too much. Some of them do give you slight attack bonuses or like an extra action kind of a thing. A fewer battlefield control, debuffs, 6 defensive boosts, not surprisingly, 9 extra damage. This is a martial class after all. Only 1 healing, none for multiple actions, and then 2 are actually team effects. As we go into the Transcendence column, you can see there are more team effects, and it's a little bit more of an even distribution of the options. You do have some area of effect. You do have some extra attack bonuses. You get some more battlefield control here. Same amount of debuffs. You actually lose some slight amount of defensive boosts, but still 4 defensive boosts out of the 21. Only 3 extra damage, but now up to 3 have healing, and then 3 allow kind of multiple action abilities like action economy boost. So quite a big, nice, even spread of abilities that come from the Transcendence effects. Let's go back to talking about all of these options and what they mean. So we took a look at all of the icons, but there is a little bit more choice as you level up in your Exemplar builds, because you actually add epithets to your name. This starts at level 3 and you get another at level 7 and 15, so this does mean even more variety. How much variety? Really? I mean, yes, again, the over 1,000 combinations of icons, then epithets, though that's not level 1, so I don't know that should even factor in. Is it too many options? Is it maybe somehow not enough? I mean, I doubt that, but let's take a look at that in closing thoughts. So anyway, to start to wrap up this video, because it's not really a class overview video, it is a video about character options. What I think of it, what you think about it, this is where we're going to get into a little bit of an open discussion. Just to kind of recap, exactly what constitutes a unique option or build is a bit fuzzy, because it's much clearer with classes that have like one subclass choice and no other choices at level 1, like Magus or the old Druid. The new Druid does have the new Voice of Nature selection, which is like kind of what we're increasingly seeing now, where you kind of pick a subclass, but then there's also somewhat of a secondary subclass. Very, very weakly so, I would say, with the new Druid. But, with things like Wizard and Psychic, there is a very clear dual subclass option. And I see these new classes that we have in War of Immortals as just being an extension of that. There are also the completely build your own by selecting feats, Fighter and Monk. And, there's this now question I'm thinking through of like the big versus small choices. Some choices feel like a very different type of build. And then other choices within those builds feel like a different flavor of the same type. Like having a banh mi sandwich, but one is a pork banh mi and one is a chicken banh mi. It's still kind of the same sandwich. Kind of. I would still have it as one option on a menu, I guess. So I would maybe consider your one banh mi as the same character build, even if one of the sub options is a little bit different, I suppose. The question, though, is it possible to have too many options? I do actually kind of think that with the Exemplar, this is going to lead to a little bit of information overload and analysis paralysis. To keep talking about sandwiches, would you rather have someone present you 8 amazing sandwiches that are just complete, you just pick a sandwich on the menu, or the raw ingredients and ask you to design your own sandwich? I mean, I know I've gone to Mongolian buffets, right? Where you kind of just pick your protein and all the sides and ask them to scramble it up. And I feel like I always make a very underwhelming choice when I do that. And, you kind of get excited by different things, but then you realize they don't really go together that well, even if they seem interesting on their own. And I'm a little afraid of the Exemplar doing the same, where you kind of pick different things and then you realize, oh, these don't actually have a good synergy with each other. It's difficult to switch from one to the other. Maybe it would be better if, I had less choice. I will also say where I stand just kind of overall in life at this point is I make a lot of decisions. There are a lot of decisions already just in Pathfinder with all of the classes and subclasses and ancestries and, settings and all of those kinds of things. I almost kind of prefer, in a way, a simpler set of options. I do think I like the Exemplar, I like the Animist, but I would prefer slightly fewer options and just more, please just package me up a good build and I'll pick between those 5 or 6 packages. I've noticed myself, when learning video games, for example, I've kind of straight up abandoned some video games because it's too much for me. I was playing through Skyrim for the first time about, 3 or 4 months ago, and I was getting up there, but I just kind of stopped because it was too many decisions, too many things to keep track of, and it sort of stopped being fun. I'm a little bit more of I want to drop in, have a bit of a learning curve. I don't want a game to be so easy that it's not a challenge or that it's not interesting, but, have a bit of a learning curve, but don't make it a full-time additional job to keep everything going. I'm not saying that's exactly where the Exemplar is, but I am saying, based on the directions and trends that we're seeing in new class builds, if we kept going in that direction, that's where we would be. Anyway, I do want to hear what you think. Do you like this much more free form kind of build option? I think a lot of people will, because I know a lot of people like that about Fighter and Monk and others. I think it's a totally valid choice, but let's talk about it in the comments. And until then, remember, I have heard that there are technically more Pathfinder character build options than there are people on the planet, and that was before the Exemplar was introduced. But don't quote me on it, because I've never seen the math, and frankly, if I did see the math, it would probably explode my head anyway.